So, that story, we oftentimes hear it at Christmas time, right? Around the season of Advent. I'm sure that's not what you were expecting to hear as you came to church, unless we're celebrating Christmas in July all of a sudden, which I suppose we could. It's tomorrow, right? So, but there is a challenge that has been set before me today. The challenge to speak a little bit about Mary as a superhero in our Superheroes series for this summer. The challenge to share a little bit about what happened in our week away in Tennessee, working with Appalachia Service Project on our Senior Youth Fellowship mission trip. And the challenge of setting us up to spend some time apart from one another as I prepared to head out on sabbatical later this week. So, all in 10 minutes or less, let's see if we can get this done. What do you think? But first, I have a question for you. Did you hear it? Did you hear that moment? That moment when Mary went from being a young, faithful Jewish girl to being Mary, a superhero. The moment when Mary went from being a young girl, unknowing, not having any idea what might happen with her life, to becoming the superhero who was courageous and selfless and humble and compassionate and deeply faithful. That moment when Mary said yes to an experience that would be challenging and heartbreaking and life-giving and blessed. That moment when she said yes to becoming the mother of Jesus the Christ. That was the moment when Mary became a superhero in my eyes. And it's interesting because there are a couple of accounts of the birth of Jesus Christ in the Gospels, but only in the Gospel of Luke does Mary actually get to play an active role in it. In Matthew, Joseph takes the lead. The angel comes and speaks to Joseph, the angel, and then they kind of go off, and yes, Mary has this baby. But in the Gospel of Luke, Mary actually gets to make the decision. As the angel is standing there before her saying, "You have won favor with God, and don't worry, nothing will be impossible with God." Mary gets to say yes. She has that opportunity, and that, for me, is the moment when. Well, have you had a moment like that? A moment when you have actually been able to say, like Mary, "Here I am, the servant of the Lord. Let it be with me according to God's word." Have you had a moment when you said yes to something that was unknown, to something that was challenging, to an experience that you weren't sure what would happen on? A moment when you've said yes to stepping outside your comfort zone and giving yourself over to God in service. You guys blessed me all over this a couple of weeks ago now, with the opportunity to oversee a week like that. A week of yeses to God, a week of yeses to service, a week of yeses to stepping outside of comfort zones and being challenged to do things that people never ever thought that they would be able to do. And that was the week that we got to spend away with our Senior Youth Fellowship mission team on ASP, Appalachia Service Project in Tennessee. So we had a great group of young folks, our Senior Youth Fellowship crew. We had a few college-age advisors who came back with us this year, and we had a wonderful group of adults, some of whom had no idea what they were getting into. I guess I didn't set them up all that well for this experience. But it was a week of moments of stepping out of comfort zones, of stepping out of trading in suits and skinny jeans for work gloves and work boots, of trading in cell phones for opportunities to get to be in real conversation with people, to get to know people that we would never have had an opportunity to know otherwise. It was a week of conquering fears, to be sure. We had a few folks who were very afraid of being away from home. And so the idea of being away from home for 9 days, 11 hours away, not exactly like, "Pastor Jen, can you drive me home in the van tomorrow?" That wasn't an option. So we had people who conquered their fear of being away from home and homesick. We had people who conquered their fear of being touched by other people. We walked into the center where we stayed, which was an elementary school, and in the hallway was this gigantic schedule. And on the schedule it said 7:15, morning devotions, 7:30, breakfast, 8:30, leave for work sites, 11:11, hug break, right? Where you got to hug the other people on your work team. And whether they liked it or not, you were coming after them, right? So people got over their fear of being touched by other folks. People got over their fear or conquered their fear or faced their fear, at least, of all things creepy crawly. We had one team who worked in the basement of a house, what they lovingly termed the pit of despair. As they were insulating underneath this house, taking out old insulation and putting in new insulation. And so they got up close and personal with a lot of spiders. And we had another crew who worked at James's house, and James had, 2 roosters, one of which was a man-hater. He really didn't like guys. 10 cats, a couple of dogs, and snakes that he brought out to meet everybody one day as well. So people conquered their fear of things creepy crawly, and people conquered their fear of sharing their feelings and their faith, right? You don't make it through a week on mission trip at ASP where you do morning devotions and lunchtime devotions, and then you have evening gathering at night without saying a little bit about how it is that you're feeling, or a little bit about how you see God working through people in your work team or working in the world for a week. And then, to top it all off, evil Pastor Jen then made people get together in our own group, and then we had to talk more about those things. But we talked about the ways that God was calling us to serve, and the ways that we were saying yes to serving, and the ways that God then was working through us, our hands, our feet, our minds. And when I say that we said yes, I say that we said yes on 2 fronts. One was the actual physical work that we did. So we had groups that were siding, and we had groups that were insulating and working with drywall and painting and building handicap ramps and building porches and making homes warmer, safer, and drier, which is the vision of Appalachia Service Project. There was a group from, one of the other groups was working with a family that had 13 children, 11 of whom were adopted out of even worse circumstances. And one of the kids walked up to one of their work team members and said, "Oh, thank you so much. This winter we won't freeze." That's the kind of work that these folks were doing, that your mission team was doing as they went out into the world. But I say that we said yes in another way too, because perhaps even more importantly than saying yes to picking up a hammer or a knife or a screw gun or any of those things was the opportunity to say yes to building relationships. So we were able to build relationships with the people who were staffing our week down at ASP. They were 4 young adults. The oldest had just graduated from college. And they made sure that we had tools and work and food and everything that we needed for a successful week away. And then we got to work with 2 teams, one from North Carolina and one from Maryland. So we got to know them a bit throughout the week, and are currently trading some information back and forth about ongoing service projects that we do in our churches, in hopes to get some new vision and some new ideas about what might come next. We got to know one another in our group. So if you don't know the people that you leave with, by the time you get 11 hours in a van down to Tennessee, and then you sleep on a postage stamp together, then you kind of get to know one another pretty well. So we got to know our group well. But perhaps most importantly, we got to know the people with whom we were serving. We got to know our homeowners that ranged in age throughout the week, all of our teams together, from 1 to 83. People who opened up their homes and invited us in. People who opened up their hearts. People who used meager resources to make us lunch and to provide us opportunities to be welcomed and to be fed in so many different ways. So we got to build relationships with all of these wonderful people. And I say that that's perhaps one of the ways that we build the way that we most importantly say yes to God. Because once you meet somebody, once you put a face and a name to somebody, once you have an opportunity to hear their story, once you get to know them on a deep level, then you cannot ignore them. And you cannot not decide to do something about a situation. You can't decide to hurt them. You can't decide to walk away because they have provided hospitality and generosity and love. Maddie Walker said on our last night of reflection that one of the little girls at her house, Maddie said to her, "So Paisley, tell me something. Are we your favorite work crew that's ever been here before?" And Paisley said, "Oh, yeah. And Maddie said, "I'll bet you say that to everybody, don't you?" And she said, "Yup." But then she said this, 6 years old, "It's because I see the goodness in everyone." Right? It's because I see the goodness in everyone. And those are the kind of relationships that we were able to build throughout a week in Tennessee on Appalachia Service Project. It was a powerful week of saying yes, and at the end, on our final reflection night with our ASP staff folks, we all got these washers that they asked us to wear when we came back home to remind us of the experiences that we had, and of the ways that we had said yes for a week to God, and of the ways that we could do that when we come back home too. Not just to leave it behind, sitting in an elementary school auditorium in Tennessee, but to bring it home with us and to continue to serve God and to say yes to God and to step out of our comfort zones and to be challenged and to invite all of you along for the ride with us as well. So at our final reflection, we landed last Saturday night at the church in Hershey, Pennsylvania. And yes, we let the kids go into the park and have some fun because we're not that awful. But we went into the park and we had a few hours of fun. And then the last night of mission trip every year, our seniors lead our final reflection. So our seniors in high school who have just graduated. And during this reflection, they talked to us about the 4 things that they have brought home most from mission trips. And those things are skills that they can take with them for the rest of their lives, whether those are people skills or physical construction type skills. They were growth, the ways that you grow and change throughout a week on mission trip, and then you bring that home and you continue to grow and change once you come home. Faith, the ways that God speaks to us in and through these experiences and continues to challenge us beyond them. And also relationships, that word that I talked about, the relationships that are built and the relationships that grow and the relationships that continue to grow even after we have arrived back here in Connecticut. So we talked during that final reflection about all of the things that are going on in this world. Right? Every day you turn on the news and there's more bad news. There's more of something that's going on. And we know that individually we can't change all of foreign policy. We can't solve all of the problems of the world. But each of our individual yeses can do something to change the life of someone else, and that has a ripple effect. It grows out from a single yes to a bigger yes and a bigger yes and a bigger yes. And things might actually have hope of changing, and changing for the better. So, as I prepare to head out of here this week and spend 3 months away from all of your beautiful faces and all of your beautiful personalities and all of beautiful you, I think we have a challenge before us. And that challenge is not just a challenge for you, it's a challenge for me too. And that challenge is to figure out the ways that God is asking us to be about the work of God, to be about God's work in the world, right? To tune our antenna in a different way so that when someone comes up to us, we might be listening differently, and we may just have an encounter with that angel that God has sent to us, that is calling us to do something that challenges us just enough, that pushes us just enough outside of our comfort zone that we know that it is God's work that we are about. So over these next months, I challenge us all to find a way to say yes. like Mary did all of those years ago to the angel, not having any idea what was going to come ahead, but to figure out that moment when for each of us. So may it be so. Amen.